Good evening, dear listener. Tonight we drift once again into the dim corridors of forgotten time. If you're cozy in bed, eyes gently closed, or just letting your thoughts melt into the night, I'm so glad you're spending this quiet moment here. Where are you tuning in from? What time is it for you? Is it early morning? Or are you about to fall asleep with the medieval past whispering in your ear? Tonight's story is a strange one. We'll explore some of the most bizarre, unbelievable, and downright crazy beliefs that people in medieval Europe held as absolute truth. Some of them might make you laugh, some might make you wince, but all of them reveal something very human. Our endless search to make sense of a mysterious, often frightening world. So take a deep breath, let your thoughts quiet down, and follow me back in time. For centuries, the slow rhythm of human progress has quietly transformed the way we live, think, and understand the world. What was once accepted as undeniable truth has been swept away by science, reason, and time. Yet, tucked within the folds of history, are strange beliefs so unusual they feel almost magical or absurd. Tonight, let's softly step back into the shadows of the medieval mind, where superstition ruled, logic slumbered, and even vegetables were not what they seemed. Among the many strange things that troubled medieval hearts, few would suspect that one of the most feared and misunderstood of all was the humble Brussels sprout. Yes, those tiny, tightly packed green orbs, now praised for their vitamins and roasted glory, were once thought to be vessels for evil spirits. In villages across Europe, whispered tales told of children who fell ill after biting into them, of livestock that died mysteriously after crops of sprouts were harvested nearby, of strange dreams and sudden fevers that could only be explained by the presence of something otherworldly. Some claimed that sprouts grew in cursed soil, cold, damp places where spirits gathered in the fog at dusk. Herbalists and local wise women advised against cooking them on certain days of the lunar cycle, warning that the heat could awaken the demon slumbering inside each leaf. Others believed that if you sliced into a sprout and found a darkened core, it meant an evil eye had watched over your home. People carried dried sprouts in little pouches to ward off illness, believing that if they held the cursed plant, it would absorb malevolent energy instead of their bodies. In some villages, sprouts were For centuries, these beliefs clung to everyday life like morning mist, not out of foolishness, but from a deep desire to understand a world that often seemed cruel and chaotic. Long before microscopes and modern medicine, fear filled the gaps where knowledge had not yet reached, and perhaps, in a world filled with plagues, failed harvests, and unknown forces, even a Brussels sprout could become a threat. It wasn't until the dawn of the Enlightenment, when reason flickered brighter than fear, that people began to laugh at such notions, choosing science over superstition. The once dreaded vegetable slowly became a harmless crop, planted, picked, and plated without a second thought. So the next time you see one sitting quietly on your plate, remember, you live in a time when the only thing you have to fear from a Brussels sprout is whether or not it's overcooked. And now, dear listener, as the worries of the old world fade into the soft comfort of your pillows, let your thoughts drift gently like leaves on a quiet river. May your dreams be free of haunted vegetables, evil spirits, or strange cures. Now, in the echoing chambers of medieval thought, where mystery outweighed knowledge and fear shaped medicine, there lived a belief both grim and strangely poetic, that the blood of a gladiator could cure epilepsy, known then by darker names, the falling sickness or the sacred disease. Epilepsy was deeply feared. A seizure, sudden and violent, looked to the medieval mind like the body being seized by invisible hands. Or worse, by demons. When no answers came from prayers or potions, people turned to spectacle and blood. Gladiators, those hardened warriors of sand and steel, were viewed as vessels of raw power, courage, and divine favor. To drink their blood was to drink bravery itself. In Roman arenas, when the dying breath of a fighter drifted into the dust, some spectators would rush forward, not just to cheer, but to collect the warm blood in cups or rags. This act, far from symbolic, was a ritual of healing. Those suffering from seizures would be given the blood to sip, sometimes mixed with herbs or wine, in the desperate hope that the strength of the slain would chase the demons away. It wasn't just fringe belief. Even some educated physicians of the time endorsed it, blending classical Greek ideas with early Christian mysticism. They reasoned that if courage was in the blood, and fearlessness could cleanse the soul, then the body, too, might be restored. This ritual persisted, even as gladiators faded from the world. In medieval Europe, echoes of the practice remained, bloodletting continued, and stories of battlefield remedies endured. But of course, we now know epilepsy is a complex neurological disorder, not the result of demons, nor a punishment from God. It arises from electrical activity in the brain, not spiritual possession. The idea that one person's essence, through blood, could transfer healing power is both tragically misguided and hauntingly intimate. Consuming human blood, far from curing illness, risks dangerous infections and more often spread disease than stopped it. Yet there's something deeply human in the belief that courage can be shared, that strength can be passed on like a torch in the dark. It would take centuries, through the careful work of physicians, scientists, and neurologists, to untangle epilepsy from myth and place it in the realm of real medicine. Today, those who live with epilepsy are treated with care, understanding, and modern therapies. There are no more arenas, no more cups of blood, just science and compassion. So, as you close your eyes tonight, be grateful that we no longer fight shadows with shadows.
As the winds of the Middle Ages howled through villages and forests, fear traveled with them, creeping into hearts and homes in the form of wild accusations and stranger beliefs. Among the many grotesque ideas held about witches, one of the most bizarre and disturbing was the belief that witches kept male genitals as pets. Yes, in the same way someone might keep a cat curled by the fire or a raven perched on a branch, people imagined witches storing disembodied male organs in jars, boxes, or hidden satchels, feeding them grains of corn or bathing them in enchanted milk. These absurd beliefs were recorded not just in the frightened whispers of peasants, but in official documents, including witch trial transcripts and theological treatises. In 1487, the infamous witch-hunting manual Malleus Maleficarum described women who supposedly stole male organs and kept them wriggling like worms in nests. These tales were told with the utmost seriousness by inquisitors and clergymen who believed, or claimed to believe, that these organs were not only trophies, but tools of dark enchantment. It was said witches could use them to curse a man's fertility, render him impotent, or lure him into servitude. Some even believe that these so-called pets could be animated, hopping or chirping like animals, or obediently returning when summoned. While the idea seems laughable now, in its time, it fueled panic, persecution, and paranoia. Behind these grotesque fantasies lay deeper fears about female autonomy, sexuality, and knowledge. Many midwives and herbal healers, women who understood the human body and its cycles, were targeted, their remedies seen as suspicious, their independence viewed as dangerous. It's likely that misunderstandings of medicinal ingredients shaped some of these tales. Roots such as mandrake, which resembles the shape of a human body, and various fertility herbs with swollen tubers or bulbs were often used in remedies and rituals. In an age of superstition, a dried root could easily be mistaken for something more scandalous. Still, the consequences of these beliefs were devastating. Women, often widows, healers, or simply outsiders, were accused of unspeakable acts, tortured for confessions, and condemned by courts, convinced that witches slept beside sacks of stolen anatomy. It wasn't until the Enlightenment began to scatter the fog of fear that these stories were slowly unmade, and people began to ask for proof before persecution. Today, we recognize these tales as tragic illustrations of how imagination, when twisted by ignorance and fear, can lead to horror. And yet, they are a bitter reminder, too, that humans have always sought explanations for the unknown, even if the answers came dressed in nightmares. So now, as you settle beneath your blankets and let your breath grow slow and steady, take comfort in the quiet reason of the present. The world may still hold mysteries, but you no longer need to fear what hides in the shadowed jars of folklore. The witches of the past can rest, and so can you. Sleep softly, dear listener. Let go of old fears and drift into dreams where truth is clear. The night is calm, and no strange creature stirs but your own peaceful heart. In the heart of medieval Europe, where fog clung low to cobblestone streets, and the scent of herbs and smoke mingled in the air, terror had a name: the Black Death. The plague, swift and merciless, painted towns in silence and sorrow, and in its wake came desperation, and with desperation, strange remedies. Among the most bewildering was the practice of rubbing chickens, a folk cure so widespread it came to define a certain kind of medieval hope. It was believed that by pressing a live chicken, particularly a plump and healthy one, against the swollen black buboes of an infected person, the disease could be drawn from the body and transferred into the fowl. The afflicted would lie trembling, fevered, while the bird was bound gently but firmly against the wound. As the chicken squawked and flapped, the patient's family would whisper prayers, watching for signs that the chicken was absorbing the sickness. When the bird began to look ill, it was sometimes believed the transfer had succeeded. Some even repeated the ritual multiple times, rubbing different chickens on the same sore, then discarding the infected birds and trying again. This treatment was recommended in certain medieval medical texts under the umbrella of transference medicine, where illness could be moved from one being to another. Chickens in particular were seen as spiritually neutral and biologically warm, qualities thought to help them draw out imbalance or corruption. To modern ears, the idea sounds more like dark comedy than healing, but in those centuries, where bacteria and viruses were unknown, people reached for answers with the only tools they had: instinct, hope, and ritual. These practices were not born from stupidity, but from the deep human yearning to save loved ones, no matter how absurd the method. It's also important to remember that many physicians of the day had limited tools of their own. They prescribed bloodletting, aromatic herbs, crushed emeralds, or the burning of incense to purify the air. But little truly worked. Against the horror of the plague, the idea that a humble chicken might somehow intervene offered not just a cure, but comfort. Some even decorated the birds with small charms or painted their feathers with holy symbols before applying them to the skin, turning the act into a kind of sacred transaction. And while the chickens could not stop the spread of disease, the ritual gave people the illusion of control, the comfort of doing something instead of nothing. Today we know the plague was carried by fleas on rats, and that real cures require antibiotics and public health, not poultry. And yet, these old stories are more than just curiosities. They're windows into the minds of people who lived and loved and feared just as we do. So now, as the night hushes the world and your thoughts begin to soften like candlelight, imagine those old villages, lanterns glowing faintly in mist, the rustle of feathers in the arms of a desperate mother, and a sky wide and ancient above it all. No more chickens, no more plague, only quiet. In the curious courts of medieval Europe, justice was a spectacle, not only for men, but, quite unbelievably, for animals too. Long before forensic science and rational law, people believed that morality extended beyond the human soul, that animals could sin and therefore deserved punishment. This gave rise to one of the strangest chapters in legal history: the animal trials. These were not mere symbolic rituals. They were real, formal proceedings, held in actual courtrooms, often overseen by robed judges and attended by solemn townsfolk. Pigs were perhaps the most frequent defendants, blamed for biting, mauling, or killing children. In one case from 1457 in Savigny, France, a sow was dressed in human clothes, shackled, and paraded before the townspeople before being hanged for murder. But the absurdity didn't end there. Herds of insects, flocks of birds, and even swarms of rats were summoned to court for crimes such as crop destruction or invading homes. One particularly famous case occurred in 1486, when a group of rats was charged with eating barley in a French village. The rats were appointed a human defense attorney, the brilliant Barthélemy de Chassaneuz, who argued, quite cleverly, that the rats had not appeared in court due to the grave danger posed by the village cats, thus excusing their absence. Trials like these might seem like dark comedy now, but they were rooted in a worldview where divine justice governed all beings, human or not, and where everything had a place in the cosmic balance. This belief in universal accountability was tied to another idea just as unsettling: that the world was filled with witches, hidden in plain sight, weaving spells in shadow. Witches, in the minds of medieval people, were not fairy tale villains, but real threats. Neighbors, widows, healers, midwives, accused of riding broomsticks through stormy skies, of turning milk sour or causing miscarriages with a whispered curse. The fear reached a fever pitch in the 15th and 16th centuries with the spread of the Malleus Maleficarum, a grim manual for identifying and destroying witches. Its words ignited fires across Europe, leading to tens of thousands of executions, mostly of women, burned at the stake or drowned in rivers. What we see now as tragic injustice, they saw as holy duty. In a world plagued by famine, war, and disease, people longed for an enemy they could touch, and witches became the scapegoats. They represented the chaos humans couldn't understand, and punishing them offered a terrifying sense of order. Thankfully, those dark days have passed. The animals are no longer summoned to court. The witches are no longer hunted in the name of God. Our world has shifted toward reason, toward empathy. And yet, as you lie back now and close your eyes, you can still hear faint echoes from that strange past. A pig on trial, a witch whispering to the wind, a rat summoned by a parchment scroll. Let those echoes fade like mist at dawn. You're safe in the present, wrapped in the soft quilt of history's wisdom. Breathe deep, dear listener. May your dreams be quiet and your night full of peace. See you in the next dreaming, boring sleep chapter.